I worked for Air America a total of about 7.5 years. Seven,
How do
right
you,
around there.
how do you think that experience affected you in in any way, like in your life?
Oh, well, it is a very important part of my life. I met some wonderful people. My best friend, Burl King, that I flew with. We played golf together, and yeah, the people I met, obviously, the people you meet and what you do as you grow older become much more important than what you did. The friends that you have and friends you make, and the feeling that you think you did a good job. And I always felt like, even though I wasn't the world's greatest aviator, I was awful lucky, but I did feel like I was a good pilot in my profession, though there were a lot better than I. In fact, I'm privileged to have flown with Jim Ryan and Burl King and your dad, and one fella at Raytheon, Larry Hayward, who was a wonderful person and an excellent pilot, so smooth. I mean, I was not a smooth pilot. I was blessed that I always did the right, managed to do things when things went wrong. I usually ended up doing it right. And the old saying about when things go wrong, fly the airplane is number one. When things go wrong, first thing, fly the airplane. And I was always able to do that. Although, yes, I did have a fence and a Corsair, and I ground looped a Corsair. And, I've had some pilot error accidents, but when things went wrong, I usually did the right thing. That's luck. Flying, like anything else, you have to be good. It's good to be good, but it's better to be lucky, because I've flown with pilots much better than I am, much smoother, like Jim Ryan is the finest aviator, and Burl King and Paul Broussard, and at Raytheon, Larry Hayward, just smooth as glass, where I wasn't that smooth. But I was fortunate, I think, as I mentioned, that when things went wrong, I was lucky to able to do the right thing to get out of trouble. And you have to be lucky. It's just like the time I flew the B-26 out from Raytheon out to Seattle, and on the way back we passed through the Rockies at 14,000 feet, and the next thing I know, we had a load of ice, and so much ice that our airspeed went from 190, 200 down to 140, like that, and there was nothing I could do but let down. And I let down. It was either that or spin in. I let down. We came right in between two mountaintops. We missed them. Now, that's luck. That's not skill. The only good flying thing is that I said there's only one thing to do, and that's fly the airplane down. See? But other people can not be, and they could hit the mountain. So luck is such a blessing, a factor. And for the pilots, all through my flying career, I've seen too many instances where this happens, where it's just a matter of luck, where one person lucks out and makes it. And like, look at me, all the flying that I did, 14,000 hours, and a lot of it single engine. I never had a single engine quit except in F3H. I had many multi-engine failures where the engines quit, but I had the other engine to save me. So a lot of it's just unexplainable luck. I flew for 40 years, and my years as a naval aviator, night work, and then as a test pilot for Raytheon, and then with Air America, I look forward to going to work all the time. I really enjoyed flying. The only time I didn't enjoy flying was when I did my after Air America work, when I flew as a civilian pilot, and then I found out there were some phases of flying that I didn't like, and but that had nothing to do with Air America.
May have missed.
Well, I can tell you about one time in El Salvador when I had a twin beach. I bought I had a twin beach I picked up, and I had the nose extended at Hamilton Aircraft in Tucson, and Hamilton stuck the long twin nose on it, which made it much more stable. And I put a spar strap in it to beef up the wing, and a cabin hatch where you could put larger cargo in instead of the air door, and then a metal liner cabin. And the twin beach I used, as I mentioned, as an ambulance, mainly as charter ambulance work out of San Salvador, and take people back to Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans or to Miami. And on one particular occasion, I got a call that this man had contracted some type of a sleeping sickness, and he was going to die unless we got him to the hospital. So they decided to send him to Miami. Well, we left at midnight, and I filed an IFR, International Flight Plan, with Ilopango there, and we got Mr. Felipe in the plane with his doctor and his wife and a nurse. And I took off and flew up over Honduras and Belize and cut across, and about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, just before daybreak, we're coming up about 100 miles off of Key West, in between Cuba and the Keys. And all of a sudden, I hear this roar. And I look up, and right over the top of us go 2 F-106s. And I see the burner, I see the engine, the flames and everything. And I said, oh boy. And I get a call on VHF emergency channel 121.5 saying, aircraft that we just passed approaching the Keys, this is Air Force Ump-de-Ump. You are violating the United States Air Defense Zone. You are hereby ordered to follow us and land at Key West. And I said, negative. This is Navy, this is Uno Tres Tres Papa, 133 Papa, from El Salvador. I filed an international flight plan, IFR, to Miami, and they said, negative, follow us and land immediately. And I said, no. I said, I've got a sick man on board, he's dying. If I don't get him to the hospital, he'll die. And that worked, they left. So I landed, the sun came up and we got in, we landed, and I got a call from the tower. It said, call us immediately. I said, okay. So I did, I landed, and the ambulance came and they got him out of the plane, and I landed and got in there and got called, and I got put over to an Air Force officer, and he read me the riot act. How I had disobeyed orders and I hadn't followed instructions by them, and I said, sir, I filed a flight plan. I said, I have it in my hand. Do you want me to bring it to you? And he hung up. And that was the end of that. Well, the man lived, and I'm happy about it.
That's a good
I was in El Salvador. There were a bunch of Corsairs that belonged to the Salvadorian government that were just sitting at Ilopango. And one day a friend of mine said, Frank, how'd you like to fly that Corsair up to, one of the Corsairs up to Los Angeles? I said, not particularly, no, I don't. He said, well, they're going to use them in a TV program. And it was Baba Black Sheep, Corsairs. I didn't do it, and one of them had engine trouble on the way back. They had sat there for years, but those were the planes that were used by Conrad, I guess, in the Baba Black Sheep. And I'd have got a couple $100 or $1,000. No thanks. I had flown it before.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
There you go. About that?
Well,
Was it out-
when
was
I
after-
came back from El Salvador, uh, I don't remember how it happened, but I was contacted or found out by maybe the Air America magazine or something at that time in '77. Yeah, and where they needed somebody with Volpar experience, and I had about 7,000 hours in the Volpar. To ferry a Volpar from Burbank to Bern, Switzerland, and I contacted this person who was working for Sibagagi over in Switzerland, and we came to an agreement, I think a couple $1,000 and paid in Swiss francs. But I had to get my own charts, and I had to, they'd send me the survival equipment, but I had to plan it myself, and I said okay. So in the meantime, I drove from, I was here at the time, and I went over to March Air Force Base. I still had my reserve ID card, and I got in the gate, and I went into the navigation office there and told this colonel that I was going to ferry a plane from Los Angeles to Bern, Switzerland. And he said, "You're crazy." And I said, "Well, yeah, I know, but can I have the charts? You've got some old charts I can have?" And he said, "Yes, you can have them." And they were over the ocean charts, so I mapped out the course and used them. I had picked up the plane in Texas, Amarillo, where it was being painted with the Swiss, and it was 7-1 Charlie. It was the same plane I had flown in Udorn. It was the same plane Jim Ryan and Bob Main got hit in, and now it was going to be used over in Jeddah and Riyadh to spray for flies and that sort of thing. And Sibagagi, the pharmaceutical company, had the contract for this. So I picked the plane up, flew it to Burbank. They put in the same similar 650-gallon tank in the cabin, and I used it for fuel, but they were going to use it for insecticides. Okay, so Volpar got the plane ready, and then I picked it up and took one of their representatives up to Vegas, where they passed the papers for it out of state to save money. And then I took off from Vegas and non-stopped it to Norfolk just to check. That was a long flight. And non-stopped it across the country, and it worked pretty good. I landed at Norfolk, and it was snowing like crazy, cold. You know, I had spent time in Norfolk. I had never seen this before. So the next morning, I took off and flew it up to Bangor, Maine. And the whole East Coast, man, it was cold. And again, so I spent some time there, had a hydraulic leak, I remember, got it fixed. And then I took off and went up the next day up into St. John's, and oh, it was really bad there. They were having a blizzard, and I had to shoot a GCA to 0-0 and the whole bit. But I landed, and they put the plane, I taxied the plane into the hangar to keep it out of the snow and ice. I remember that. And we de-iced it, and the next morning, I found out I didn't have, the Canadians required an HF radio, and my HF radio was out. Well, I met a Frenchman named Jacques. I can't remember his last name. His first name was Jacques. And he was ferrying a twin Cessna to Africa. And we were shooting the breeze, and I said, "Man, I got to get out, and I don't want to wait." He says, "Look, we'll go out together, and I'll take off, and then you take off. And then when you got to call in," he says, "I'll call in for you on HF, and then we'll go." And it worked. We took off, and we got airborne. He called in, and they called for me, and then he called in for me on HF, and then I went my way. And I never saw him again, but he went. But I ended up flying from St. John's to the Azores. I didn't go all the way across. I could have nonstop. But I flew across, and I flew at about 10,000, maybe 9 or 11,000 feet odd altitude. And of course, I had a little ADF needle, but that you couldn't, you know, it didn't work. You couldn't, the range. So I used my course. I plotted out every 60 miles, I changed course, just like Lindbergh, just like anybody had to do, without any navigational equipment. And I picked up the Azor low freak that night, and when we got to came time to land, the wind was like 90 degrees, crosswind on the runway. Well, it was a real wide runway, and I had landed the Vulpar lots of times crosswind. So I came in and landed on the downwind side and landed it right across the runway. And the wind was so strong, it stopped in nothing flat with the reverse. And I went in there, and I'll be darned, we couldn't get anything to eat or drink. Of course, I was by myself. I couldn't get anything to eat or drink because everything was closed. And so I went to bed hungry that night. The next morning I got up and ferried the plane, took it to Spain, and then ended up in Bern, Switzerland, and it was quite an interesting flight. I felt like a modern day Lindbergh, but with two engines. And of course I didn't fly near the distance or the time he did. What he did, I still say Lindbergh's feat was most unbelievable feat that I can imagine what he did with no windshield, looking out through a periscope and being up all those hours. And what he did was the feat of feats. And then my hero, Jimmy Doolittle, his flying on instruments totally for the first time, and many of the things he did flying off the carrier, he was my boyhood hero also. And my joke is the first man that ate an artichoke. Figure out how to eat an artichoke, he had to be something.